Microsoft. She's a solution specialist, and she is going to present an overview of Teams calling. And with that, Kathleen, I will turn it over to you to better introduce yourself, because I'm sure you know yourself better than anybody.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Craig. So hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the session today, which is an overview of Microsoft Teams calling. Before we start, just a few slides before we dive in. The charity that the conference is supporting this year is Children's First Fund. It's an absolutely amazing charity. You will see a QR code to do a direct donation, as well as the website link on there as well. So please do, before the end of the session, check those out. Every little helps. I also wanted to you might have seen this if you've been in this conference, this slide a few times now, but obviously thank you so much to all of our sponsors for helping to make this event as successful as it is. And I will share this slide at the end, but any kind of feedback that you can provide is really, really helpful. So please feel free to provide feedback on any of the sessions, the speakers and the conference itself. I'll pop this at the end of the slide as well, so you have it if there's not enough time now.
I hate to interrupt you here, but we've been having issues with the QR code directing to last year's forum. I don't know if we've gotten that fixed. The link should work, so please use the link.
Use the link. Don't ignore this, but use the link. No problem. But all the feedback really makes it a better session. Okay, so just a quick introduction to me, your speaker for today. So my name is Kat Greenan. I'm a Microsoft Solutions Specialist, and I specialize in Microsoft Teams. And my role is to really help customers, specifically in the UK, but also around the world, with their Microsoft Teams deployment, including their looking at Microsoft Teams telephony deployments as well. I am quite involved in the community, so you'll see some handles there. I've got my Twitter handle, a LinkedIn QR code. Please feel free to connect with me. I share updates about new releases and features for Microsoft Teams. And in the middle there, I do have a blog, a Teams blog called collabwithkat.com, which is how-tos and tips and tricks on using Microsoft Teams. So please feel free to follow, subscribe if you want to get some more tips. Okay, so in terms of the session today, there's a few things that we're going to run through. We're going to be looking at the different scenarios available in Microsoft Teams calling. So I am going to show you a live demonstration of what it looks like from the end user perspective, some of that functionality when you upgrade your users to Microsoft Teams and use the calling plans or direct routing. And we're also then going to be looking at personal and shared devices. One of the great things about Microsoft Teams is that it is a seamless experience, whether you're using a mobile, a phone, a meeting room device, or your desktop. So I wanted to show you some of the devices that Microsoft Teams calling is available on. We then need to look at migration paths. There's a couple of options that you have when you're looking at migrating to Microsoft Teams calling. There is also some licensing implications as well. So we are going to look at the different licensing implications for Teams calling, but also Teams meeting rooms as well. So you'll get a good understanding of that, hopefully by the end of the session. Now, I'm going to show you a live demonstration of the calling functionality, but one of the things I wanted to start with is how much Microsoft Teams has grown in the sense of becoming more of a phone system. When it was first released, Microsoft Teams is still a relatively new product. It was a basic kind of dial plan. Okay, we've got a dial pad, we call numbers, and there was a lot of functionality that organizations need in their phone system that wasn't available. That's certainly changed. There's a huge amount of features and functionality that really is competitive to other telephony solutions. So there's things like the ability to integrate call centers. There's meeting room devices having Teams calling through a conference room. There's things like live events where we're doing one-to-many type events in Microsoft Teams. There's call forwarding, voicemail, being able to work on the mobile and have that same experience as working on your desk. So all of these things are really, really crucial and important when moving to Microsoft Teams. And what I want to show you is some of that functionality and what's available when you do move to Microsoft Teams for telephony. So let's dive into a live demonstration. So I'm going to open up Microsoft Teams. Let me know if you have any issues with that. I did forget to say, actually, if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat window. We will have time at the end to go through those when we finish the session. So what you can see on my screen is Microsoft Teams. I'm actually in the browser at the moment using Microsoft Teams, and one of the things that your users will notice, the first thing they'll notice when you upgrade to Teams only mode, when you move your calling plan, or you move to direct routing, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on as well, they will see in their calls tab on the left-hand side a dial pad. So they now have access to a dial pad, where instead of phoning by name, so I can make a Teams to Teams call, in this scenario, I can call a mobile number, I can call a landline, and I can make those calls directly from my Teams client. Now, one of the pieces of feedback that we've heard from end users, and I agree with it, if I'm honest, is that if I am working in Microsoft Teams, say I'm in a team, I'm in a files area, I'm working on a file, when it decides to work, I don't want to have to, go all the way into the calls tab, dial out a number, type it out, and then make a call. It's just not a productive way of, making calls when I'm working on something. So just a quick tip for you, if you are using Microsoft Teams for any kind of calling, what you can do is actually make a call from the search bar. And this is not specific to Microsoft Teams calling, but it is just a nice tip that I like to share. So when you're in the search bar, if you type the / and then call, hit enter on your keyboard, I can search for a person's name and I can give them a call directly from my search bar. Or when you do move to Teams calling and you do get that dial plan and you can dial out, you can type in a mobile number and you can call that number directly from there without having to go out of the way into a different tab, into a different area of Teams. So if you do have any kind of resistance from end users, I would always suggest that little tip there. Just an FYI, while I'm here, I love tips and tricks for Teams. You can type a / and actually send a chat message by typing in chat. Again, I hit enter on my keyboard, I type in the person's name, I can click on Adele, and I can send a message. And I can send that directly from the search bar. I don't have to move out of the file or the conversation or whatever I'm doing in Microsoft Teams. So I've digressed a little. Let's go back to my calls tab. So they'll notice the dial pad. I can make calls from here. I can make calls from my search bar. What I can also do is create different contact groups, and you can actually do this out of the box with Microsoft Teams. So if a user wanted to customize their speed dial, then they certainly can. Now, what Microsoft Teams will do, if you've been using Teams and making calls and receiving calls, it will actually pick up the people that you speak to on a regular basis, and it will populate them in your speed dial. And this is a new user, so at the moment I don't have any contacts, but if I scroll down, I can see some other contacts in here that I can quite easily make a audio or a video call to. One of the things that your users will experience is the contacts. So in my contacts, you'll be able to see a list of the people that you speak to in your organization and outside of your organization. Now, just one thing to note is when you move to Microsoft Teams and you upgrade to Teams only mode, if you're using Exchange Online or Exchange Hybrid, your contacts will sync with Outlook. So when you upgrade, what you'll find is you'll have all of the kind of numbers and names that you have in your Outlook contacts. They'll be added to Teams. And if you are using Skype for Business, the same thing happens. All of your Skype for Business, all of your Outlook contacts will be synced and go straight through to Microsoft Teams. So your users will actually see all of them here in the contacts. Of course, as a user, I can go in, I can add different contacts, I can customize this, but they shouldn't have to. It should automatically do that when you upgrade to Teams only mode. I will have a history of my calls, and this is going to show you any incoming and outgoing calls. Any Teams meetings obviously will be in your calendar. What I'm also going to do, let me just hit a refresh on that because it's when I've zoomed in, it's decided to hide my voicemail. You do have voicemail capability in Microsoft Teams. You'll see when I've refreshed that, it's gone into my nice new upgraded color of Teams, which I much prefer. You do have a voicemail capability in Teams as well. So one of the really nice things about voicemail is as an end user, I can access my voicemail from here. As soon as I receive a voicemail, I will receive a notification. It will appear in my activity, tab here, it will appear as a little 1 next to this voicemail, and I will also receive an email. So I will receive an email with the recording of that voicemail as an MP4 file. A great feature of Microsoft Teams, which is specific to Microsoft Teams, is the voicemail will actually, if I click on it here, you can see I've got a voicemail from Adele that's 8 seconds long. When I click on it, you'll see it transcribes the voicemail for me. So I don't have to listen to this voicemail if I don't want to. I could just read it, which is a lot easier when it comes to people sharing their phone number or their email address. I don't have to listen to the message 5 or 6 times to try and take that number down. Now, if I did want to, I could decide to listen to it and slow it down or speed it up so I can control the pace of the message that she's left. This also gets sent to the user's inbox, so they will receive that email with the MP4 file of the recording, but they will also receive this transcription as well. So if they don't check their voicemail from here, they will get an email. And for those HR teams out there, there is actually profanity masking within the transcription of the voicemail, so you don't have to worry if there are any rude words or anything like that. It does mask those in the voicemail transcription. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to call Adele back and show you some of the functionality when you're in a one-to-one Teams call. So what I'm going to do is just going to click on the 3 dots here and I'm going to call Adele back. So let's give her a call. Pop myself on mute so I can't hear my own voice. So here you can see I'm in a call with Adele, and this could be a call. This at the moment is a Teams call, Teams to Teams call, but it could be a call to a mobile number, could be a call to a landline. I could have received the call. The point is that I'm on the phone with someone. Now, if I've received a call from Adele, and actually the call is more appropriate for another colleague, what I can do is I can quite easily use some of this really nice Teams functionality to transfer the call to another colleague. So what I could decide to do, if this call is actually not for me, I could click on the 3 dots and I could actually choose to just transfer this call. Now, when I choose transfer, it's bringing me up a box with a list of all of the contacts in my organization. I can actually search for someone else if I want to, and I can actually see their status. So I can see if they're online or available, busy, in a meeting, out of office. I can see Alan right now is offline. And when I click on Alan, I could choose to transfer the call. So it will go directly through to Alan. But because he's offline, I might actually want to click on this little arrow and send it to his voicemail. So I can say to the person on the call, Alan's going to be able to help you. I'll transfer you through. He's not available, but I'll let you go through to his voicemail so you can leave him a message. So it just makes that transferring of a call experience for your end users a lot more seamless. Now, on the other side, the other user who's made the call is actually just on hold. So they're put on hold while you're doing this. Another feature, so you can see it's on hold, or another scenario is I actually want to talk to Alan before I transfer the call. So I actually want to check with him if he's happy for me to transfer it over. So in this scenario, what I could do is I could click on the 3 dots and I could choose consult, then transfer. And what this will do is open up the same box and I can search for Alan. I'm going to click on Alan, but this time I'm going to consult with him. What this is going to do is it's going to open up a chat box within my Microsoft Teams calling window. And this is the same chat as your Teams chat. It's just bringing or pulling in that chat into a kind of little window here for you to access it. So if I've been chatting with Alan, over the past few months, I will see the chat history in here. But what I could decide to do is I could say, hey, Alan, can you take a call? And I can ask him and he might reply to say yes or no, send it to my voicemail, or who is it? And I can tell him who it is. What I can also decide to do is I could call Alan. While that person is on hold, I can make a call to Alan, an audio call, and I could say, Alan, this person's on the phone for you. Do you want to answer it or not? Now, in answer to your question, I just seen that there's a question in terms of transferring a call to Teams users that don't have phone system or domestic. Yes, so if you wanted to, you could transfer this call. If Alan didn't have a calling plan or direct routing, he was just using Teams out of the box, no additional licensing, then yes, he could receive that phone call to whoever's phone, the dial-in number or whatever it may be. And I believe if you want to be able to do this, if I want to transfer the call, I need I need those licenses to be able to use this functionality. But the person on the other side doesn't need it. Okay, so there's a couple of other things. When I'm in a call, there may be a scenario where I don't want to actually transfer it to another person. I just need someone else to join this call. So there's 3 of us in the call. So there's another person I need to add. Now, what you can do out of the box with Microsoft Teams is click on your participants pane, and you can simply add someone to the call by typing in their name. But with audio conferencing licensing, which I'll go through again a bit later on in the licensing section, but if you have that license, you can actually dial in a number and add that number into the call. So Teams out of the box is just adding another person in your organization, whereas the audio conferencing license gives you the ability to add and dial in phone numbers to this call. So I could dial in a landline or someone who's using their mobile phone. Let me just go off that for now. Now, there are a couple of other things as an end user that I can do with Microsoft Teams calling. And one of the things that I could decide to do is create what's called a call group. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hang up with Adele for now. And I could work in maybe the sales team or a reception area or a customer service team. And when I receive phone calls from Microsoft Teams, I actually want my colleagues to be able to answer those calls as well. So, we can help the customers that are calling or whoever it is that's coming through. So what I could decide to do is actually go into my settings and create a call group and change my call answering rules. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to manage my account and settings. I'm going to go to the calls tab. And you'll see in the calls tab, the first thing I have is call answering rules. So I could decide how to handle any incoming calls. So in here, I have calls ring me and also ring no one else. But I want to change this because I want calls to ring me, but also ring my colleagues in the reception area or in my sales team. So in this scenario, what I'm going to do is actually create a call group. So I'm going to choose this call group option. And now it's asking me to create my call group. I can add the people in my sales team or in my reception area team or my help desk or whatever it may be, and I can add them to my call group. So I can go ahead and type Megan, I could type Nestor, Irvin, and whoever else I have in this tenant. So here we are. Imagine these are my sales team, if you ignore the titles for now. But here I have the people in my call group. I've added them. If I scroll down, I can actually decide how that group receives the calls. So I could decide, okay, when a call rings me, it rings Megan, Nestor, Irvin, and Deborah at the same time. And the first person to answer it gets the call. I could decide not to do that. And I could decide, okay, if I'm not available, then I want calls to go through to the call group. So in this scenario, I would change it from all the same time to in order of above. And now it's going to calls are going to come through to me. Then if I don't answer, they'll go to Megan. Then they'll go to Nestor, then Irvin, and so on. And in order to change how the calls are received in the order, unfortunately, one of the things I have asked for in user voice is the ability for an arrow to kind of move these users up and down. But at the moment, if you wanted Irvin, for example, to be first or last, you would have to click X and you would have to type his name in again. And you can see that's him moved to last. So that's how you would move the order of the call group if you chose this option. So that's a little bit clunky, but it's quite easy for me to set this up as an end user. So I'm going to hit save. And now calls will ring me. They will also ring my call group, which are these people. Now, as soon as I add someone to a call group, they will receive a notification in Microsoft Teams to say that they have been added to my call group. So they won't get a surprise one day when they receive a call that was maybe for someone else or a generic kind of question that's come through. If I wanted to, if I'm off on annual leave or on sick or I'm out of the office, I could decide to forward my calls, and I could decide to forward it either to my voicemail or, again, to that call group. So if I'm not going to be available, if any calls come through to me, they're instantly going to be forwarded to these members, to my call group. And again, they're in order. They're being rung in that order. So it'll go through to Megan, then Nestor, then Deborah, and so on. Now, as an IT administrator, you can set this up on your user's behalf. So if you didn't want your users to go in and have to set this up, you can certainly do that from the admin center. It just allows them to have a little bit more control over their call answering rules. Now, again, this is a couple of things that they can do to configure in their voicemail. So leave a nice voicemail message when people call. And I always do like to point this out, is the changing the ringtone. So you can change the typical Teams ringtone, which people sometimes hear in their nightmares. You can change that to a more upbeat ringtone if you wanted to, and you could decide to change different ringtones for the different types of calls. So calls that are from me, any forwarded calls, delegated calls, I'll come on to in a second. But there's just a couple of things that I can do with Microsoft Teams calling. Now, there are some advanced scenarios that are available. What I've gone through here is just some of the end user features. But as an organization, what I can actually do is have something that's a little bit more advanced than a call group, which is a call queue. So a call queue is where you, and this comes with your phone system license from Microsoft. If that's quite funny, you have to change it because you heard the TV commercial. Yes, I love changing the ringtones for the default Teams one. But the call queue is a more advanced version of the call group. So a call queue is where you will create a service number. So it's a number that customers or people will phone for the organization. It's not a user number. So we create a service number. And what we can do with that service number is create a greeting. So we can pre-record organizational greeting as an MP4 file. We can upload it to the admin center. So when a customer phones that service number, the greeting will play. Some organizations get actors to record their greeting if you want to, each to their own. I can also include hold music, and I can again play the default hold music from Teams. I could even upload my own hold music. So when somebody phones that service number, they get the greeting, please wait while we, answer your call, and then they hear some hold music. Now with the call queue, you can actually decide how many people wait in the call queue. So you could say, okay, I only want 50 people to wait at one time in the call queue. The maximum is 200. So you can have a maximum of 200 people waiting in this call queue for their call to be answered by the organization. You can also decide on a wait time. So in here you can see I've actually, sorry, this is a bit fast, but you can see there I've got a maximum wait time of 20 minutes. So I don't want anybody waiting longer than 20 minutes in my call queue. If they do wait longer than 20 minutes, you can decide what happens. You can say, okay, they're waiting more than 20 minutes, send it to a voicemail, put it through to another number, put it through to department. So you can route those calls and decide what happens. Now, you can choose how the calls are distributed. So when somebody phones that service number, you could decide on a group of people that gets rung when somebody phones the service number. It could be a sales team, a service desk, help desk, reception, customer service team. Typically those teams are answering lots of calls for customers. And you can decide on how the calls are distributed. So you could decide on an order of a specific order. So phones agent 1, then it goes through to agent 2, then agent 3. You could also do it based on presence in Teams. So if somebody is offline in Teams, or if they are on a call, the call queue won't go through to them, basically. And you could do it in a round robin. So if you're in a sales team, you might want to make it a bit more fair for your employees. So you could say, okay, caller A goes through to agent A, caller B goes through to agent B, and so on. So do it more so everyone gets an even amount of calls. So you have quite a lot of control in a call queue, which is a little bit more formal, and it's definitely different from a call group because it's doing it from a service number that customers will phone. Now, one thing that is very new that has been introduced is the ability to add a call queue as a tab in a Microsoft team. So you can see here, apologies, it is a little bit blurry, but you can see I'm in a team, I'm in a support channel, and this is where all my support agents are. And I can see I've added the calls tab at the top. When I'm in the calls tab, I actually have a history of the call queue. I have my dial pad that's been integrated as well, so it makes it easier for me to make calls. And I can also at the bottom see all the agents that are available, agents that are already in a call, that are green, and anybody who's in the call queue that I've set up. So this is a very new feature that's available now, is adding those call queues as a tab to make it easier for your support team or whoever it may be to manage those calls coming through. Now, if we want to take it one step further, we can have an auto attendant. And an auto attendant is slightly different. It's using a call queue, but again, it's a customer's phoning a service number. They're waiting a call queue. But this time you can provide an organization greeting, and instead of having to pre-record it, you can type it out and the auto attendant will read the organizational greeting. With the auto attendant, you can have menus. So dial 1 for finance, dial 2 for sales, dial 3 for customer service, and so on. So you can create corporate menus and dial menus, basically. So when somebody phones, you can create basically you can route those calls to the different departments. Call 1 for finance, you can route it and send it to the finance team. And again, you can decide how those calls are answered by the finance team. With the auto attendant, there's multiple languages. There's text-to-speech options. There is also options to integrate extension numbers. If somebody knows who they want to phone, you can use the auto attendant for them to just add the extension and be put straight through to a different person. And you can also include holiday and business hours. So you could decide on different messages and rules when someone calls on Christmas Day. Hopefully you're not working on Christmas Day, and you could decide what happens to that call. You could say, okay, leave this message and send it to a voicemail. And the same with business hours. If somebody phones outside of business hours, you could say, okay, leave this message and send it to either a number or a voicemail, or just hang up the call. You have a bit of control over that. And when you move to Teams calling, this is all included. This is not additional. If you've bought phone system licenses, then you'll have access to create the call queues and auto attendants. Another advanced scenario, I'm just conscious of the time, another advanced scenario is shared line appearance, so delegation. So you can, you do have to set this up on behalf of your users, but you can set up a delegate for an executive. So for example, if there is an executive who has a personal assistant, that personal assistant makes and receives calls on behalf of them, you can certainly have that in Microsoft Teams. And what you will see is there's an option for the delegate to make a call, and they can make a call as themselves or as their manager. So this is something that you have, again, in Microsoft Teams and calling, and that you would set up on behalf of your users. Reporting is just something I wanted to touch on. There is a lot of different types of reporting in Microsoft Teams for your calling. There is one that I wanted to point out, which is the call quality dashboard. Now, if you have gone into your Teams admin center and you have viewed your call quality dashboard, you might see that it is not the best in terms of how it conveys the data. So the data is actually great. It tells you about your quality of all of your calls throughout the entire organization. Just doesn't show it very well. And so what I would highly recommend doing, and I will post the link in the chat, is actually pulling that data and putting it into Power BI. Now, the only caveat there is you need the Power BI desktop. So as long as you've got the desktop installed, you will be able to pull the data from your call quality dashboard and put it into here. And it just looks a lot better. So in your call quality dashboard, your help desk or service desk can go in. They can have a look at the overall call quality. They can look at call quality based on location, office, user. They can have a look at who was using Wi-Fi, network issues, latency. You get quite a good view of the calls that are happening in your organization. And what you will also now be able to see, which is a new feature, is reports from your call queue. So you can see a history of the call queue, how long people were waiting in a call, when they were sent through to the agents, how long people spent with the customer, when they were on the call queue, and so on. So you will get auto attendant and call queue reporting as well as your call quality. So just to make you aware of that, I will post the link in the chat before the end of the session today. It's something I would highly recommend. Okay, so let's take a quick look then at personal and shared devices. So Microsoft Teams, as we mentioned, the aim is for it to be a seamless experience across any device. And with Microsoft Teams, there is individual and personal devices. So this is where your users will either be working from home, they will be on the go, on the road quite a lot. They could be a road warrior, or in an individual office, or they have a dedicated workspace. And so some of the things that we need to consider are rolling out Microsoft Teams, not just for users on their desktop, but encouraging users to download the mobile application, so they can use all the functionality on the mobile. If there are any kind of headsets or anything like that that they require, we need to make sure that we do an inventory of what our users have and what they need for our different user profiles. There's a lot of, when I speak to organizations, there are some concerns around people using personal devices for work tools and work applications. And one thing I would definitely say is if you have bought Microsoft 365 licensing, you will have access to Microsoft Intune, which is a very powerful tool which manages all of your personal devices, and you can actually prevent people from taking corporate information outside of a corporate application on their iPad or their mobile. So if there were concerns over security, I would definitely say, obviously this is not a mobile device management session, I would definitely say look into Microsoft Intune. That's going to help, because nowadays people just want to pick up a phone and start using it. And so what we want to do is enable people to do that in a secure way. The other side of it is group workspaces. So what we tend to do is a bit of inventory around the meeting rooms that you have. So do you have huddle spaces? Do you have common areas like a reception area? Do you have a small meeting room? Do you have large meeting rooms? And what type of devices there should we be using? Because there are lots of different devices that Teams works with. For meeting rooms, there's obviously Surface Hubs, there's working with projectors, collaboration devices, and then room systems themselves. So one of the things that I would just say is have a look at what you have at the moment and what devices you require for Teams meeting rooms. I'll come on back to meeting rooms in a second, but just taking a quick look at the personal devices. So Microsoft Teams, when you move to the Teams calling to phone system, using Teams as your phone, you can actually use the mobile app in the same way as you can the desktop. So in here, you can see that I'm dialing out. I still have a dial pad. I'm dialing out a landline, a phone number, and you can see I'm in that one-to-one call. What you'll also see is actually a delegation setup. So in here, I'm making a call. I'm dialing my number on the mobile app from here. And what you'll see is I'm actually going to, when it types out the number for me, I'm going to call on behalf of either myself or Adele. So that's the delegation. So I would call on behalf of Adele if I was the delegate of Adele. And then when I phone someone, it would appear as her calling. So the mobile app, same experience as the desktop app when you move to Teams calling. Now there are, for Teams meeting rooms, what I would say is if you are moving to Teams meeting rooms, check your devices. Not all devices are compatible with Microsoft Teams Rooms. Now, Teams Rooms, again, it's the same experience as the mobile and the desktop. If you have users joining a call or joining a meeting from one of these devices, I can share screens, I can dial someone in, I can transfer calls, I can still collaborate in the same way I can with any other device. And there's some additional features that these devices have, or this feature has, specific for meeting rooms. So for example, if I join a meeting room, I walk into a physical room. So I walk into a meeting room, there's a group of people who are in a conference call on a device, a Polycom device. There's a few people on their laptops, and I join the meeting from my laptop. It will actually put me on mute automatically to reduce the echo. So I'm not sure if anybody has walked into a meeting room and just heard the horrible echo that happens, and then everybody has to decide to go on mute to figure out who it was. Teams will automatically do that for you. It also uses Bluetooth technology to pick up meeting rooms that are close by. So it will pick up, there's a meeting room, conference room Baker nearby. Do you want to join it? So there's little nice features like that with meeting rooms that make the experience, pretty great for your end users. But there are some devices that are not compatible, so I would just say check that before you look into it. And you can find compatible devices just on the Microsoft Docs website. And there's also thinking about physical phones. If you did have users who needed that same experience, you can have Teams phones set up. And again, it's the same experience. The user can log in, they can share, they can transfer calls, they can make calls, receive calls. And what we tend to find are sometimes these are for personal users on their actual desk, and sometimes they are in a reception area. So if you have like a common area phone where there's people needing to make calls, these tend to work quite well for Microsoft Teams rooms on them. We don't find these as frequent just because of remote working, and most people are kind of used to mobile and laptops and computers for their calling. So there are licensing implications for using Teams on a meeting room device. So first of all, you need to find out if your meeting room device is compatible. Then when it is, you have to buy a license to be able to deploy Microsoft Teams rooms on it. And here are your licensing options. And there's two options that you have. The first one is standard, Teams Room Standard. It's £11 per device per month. If you're not in the UK, then it is $15 per device per month. And here are a list of the features that you get with the Teams Rooms license, the standard license. So you'll get Skype for Business, which will go because we'll be using Microsoft Teams. You get a phone system license, which gives you Microsoft Teams. It's basically your cloud PBX. You get audio conferencing, which is, like I mentioned, being able to dial numbers into a call. What audio conferencing also gives you is the ability, when I start or create a Microsoft Teams meeting from Outlook, it will give me the ability for people to dial in. So let me just show you very quickly. This is a meeting from my Outlook calendar. You can see I've got the Teams meeting, I've got the link to join, but then I have audio conferencing, the license assigned to me. And so people can dial into the meeting and they can add their PIN and they can join via landline or mobile. So this is the audio conferencing license that gives you that. And so what you can do is set up meetings, including the meeting room device, and people can join via landline or mobile. You'll have Intune to help manage the devices, and those licenses are available direct from Microsoft or through a Microsoft partner. Now, there is the other option, which is Teams Rooms Premium, £37 per month per device, or $50 per device per month. Device month. And in here, you'll see you get all the same stuff, but you do get extra for the hefty price on there. It's a managed service from Microsoft. So it's support from Microsoft. There are portals that you can use to manage all of your devices, especially if you're a large global organization with lots and lots of meeting rooms, lots of meeting room devices to manage. This is the license I would suggest. It is a more expensive price, but in the long term, it's definitely worth doing. So you get better management of all the devices, as well as support and managed services from Microsoft, who can just look after all of your devices for you. So I would definitely say have a look into those. But typically, customers who are in that kind of SMC space, we tend to find them using this license. And you need that per device. Okay, so there is then thinking about migrating to Microsoft Teams calling, and there's a few different options that you have, a few decisions to make it the best experience for you and what's more appropriate for your type of organization. So calling for the cloud, what you can see on my screen is how we would kind of view Microsoft Teams calling. So first of all, as a basic, you need Office 365. Typically, you'll want Microsoft Teams deployed in the organization, and most organizations are here. So they've got Teams, they're using Teams, they've got Office 365, synced identities, we're set up, we're already using it, and that's our modern workplace. Now, in order to use Teams calling or Teams as your telephony solution, you need to buy what's called a phone system license. I'll go through pricing with this in a second as well. And this is your cloud PBX. So at a minimum, you need this to be able to use a phone system in the cloud. Now, underneath, you have two options. So, and you have options for your PSTN calling. So you can basically decide on how you will be billed and who will be your provider for PSTN calling. Option one you have here is calling plans. Now, Microsoft calling plans. So this is where Microsoft is going to be your PSTN provider. You will be charged by Microsoft, and I do have the pricing for some of the calling plans. They also have all of the information on their kind of local charges and things like that on their website. But this is where you're buying the calling plans direct from Microsoft. Now, there's a couple of caveats with this one. So for smaller organizations, we tend to find them, going for the calling plans. It's the easiest option. You add them onto your tenant, and then you can start kind of, asking Microsoft for phone numbers. You can even port old phone numbers that you're already using with the calling plans. So that's absolutely fine. They are only available in certain countries. So the ones, they're adding lots of new countries every day, but there are certain countries like Asian countries that don't have calling plans available. So for example, we had a customer who had an office in Dubai, and they couldn't use the calling plans for that office, obviously, because they weren't available. So I would definitely say check before you're looking at calling plans on the availability. Now, another thing that we've come across is that some organizations that we work with do think that the calling plans are a little expensive. For if they're a particularly large organization, the calling plans can be a bit hefty. They're a per user, per month price model. There is pooling available, which makes it a little bit cheaper and more cost effective for the minutes. I'll go through that towards the end of the session. But calling plans, I just take a look at where the availability is. Now, the other option in here is direct routing. So this is where you're basically connecting your SBC into Microsoft Teams. So your existing telco provider will provide your PSTN calling and remain the organization that bills you for your calling minutes. So this is if you are already in a 3-year agreement with your telco provider and you want to move to Teams calling, but you can't leave you're in the middle of a 3-year agreement, you can't move to calling plans. So you could do direct routing quite easily with Microsoft Teams. This is also if you do a cost comparison and the cost is a little bit cheaper with your existing provider. If you're, in an agreement, a long-term agreement that tends to pull the price down a little bit, that's an option that customers tend to go for as well with direct routing. So it's using your existing telco provider, but doing all of your PSTN calling and everything through Teams, but you're just connecting your SBC into it so you can route calls from there. What you can also do is have a mixture of both. So it's not just one or the other. You could have a group of users on the calling plans, depending on their location, and then a group of users through direct routing. You can also, I don't recommend this, but you can also have one user on both. And you can pick and choose which calls go through the calling plans and which calls go through direct routing. And obviously you'll be billed differently depending on which one they use. So it's a bit flexible. You have a mixture there, but there's a decision to be made. It's something to look into. It's pricing and availability for these two. If you're looking at those options. And again, you can have a mixture. And with both options, you can port your old phone numbers. You don't need to get new phone numbers for either option. If you do want new numbers, of course, you can get them. But the only key difference is availability and price. Okay, so once we figure out, we've got our phone system, okay, we're going to do either calling plans or direct routing, we made our decision. What we need to think about is how we are going to migrate. So which migration path should I take? There's a couple of options that you have. Option one is coexistence. So this is where you are overlapping the capabilities of both telephony solutions at the same time. So you have Teams turned on for calling, and you also have your existing telephony solution also able to make calls. So as an end user, I can, for a period of time, dial a number through Teams, and I could also dial a number through my existing solution, whatever that may be. Now, the reason you might want to look at doing coexistence and do an overlapping type of migration is if you have a very complicated system in place. So if you have, lots of SIP trunks and legacy PBX systems, and if you've got a lot of things that you need to migrate over to Microsoft Teams, coexistence is probably better, just because you have a lot more control over the migration. So you can do it in phases. Obviously you can look at doing pilots and things like that to test the functionality, but it's a lot more controlled. It's a lot less quicker than the other option, but it's if you have a complicated system, I definitely say coexistence migration is better. It also gives users a chance to get used to the new technology, so they get used to Teams, they can practice it, they can try it, but they have the comfort of knowing they can use their old system if they're struggling for a period of time. So that is one option. Another option, which actually in our organization, this is the preferred option because it's the quickest way to migrate to Microsoft Teams, is cutover. So I could decide this is where you are literally switching off your old solution and turning on Teams. Users don't get a choice of using two at the same time. They go from one old solution, and over a weekend or over a night, depending on how big you are, users turn up and they have access to Teams and they make all their calls through Teams. So it's the quickest way to migrate to Microsoft Teams calling. We've done this particularly for Skype for Business organizations. If you're using Skype for Business, on-prem, if you've got a hybrid solution, or you're on cloud, even easier, you can simply kind of move your users across, flip them all to Teams only mode, make sure you've got phone numbers in place, and then switch off Skype. The only tricky bit is removing the Skype client from everyone's computers, is what we've come across, but it's definitely the quickest way to move. If you have a complicated environment, don't do the cutover, because there's no point of return. It's a kind of all or nothing type of migration. If you're doing cutover, 100% always do a pilot or a proof of concept to make sure all of the capabilities are available. You need to do a kind of feature comparison to make sure there's nothing missing that users had and needed. And if you are doing a POC or a pilot, please don't use executives. I mean, you can if you want to, but in the past, we've used executives, or we had customers who've used executives. And if things go wrong, they could, impact if they're being a sponsor of the project, they might not be as involved as you would want them to be. So, testing things with a variety of different users, not just, your executives. You want things to go right for them. So we've got options for direct routing or calling plan. We then need to think about our migration path. Then we need to also look at licensing. So the last piece I just wanted to make you aware of is the licensing required for Microsoft Teams calling. So the first license you'll see here is the phone system license. That's the cloud PBX. You need this. There's no getting around it. You need this one to be able to actually use Teams for calling. And this is £6 or $8 per user per month. So it's a per user per month fee. And it's also included in Office 365 E5. So if you have Office 365 E5 or Microsoft 365 E5, then you already have this license included. So you don't need to buy this as an additional. And you'll just see, and I can share these slides afterwards as well, you'll just see the feature that's related specifically to the phone system license. So this is your cloud PBX, you need this. The next one is audio conferencing. Now, the audio conferencing license, we have had organizations who actually choose not to license all of their users with this, and they only license the users who are setting up meetings on behalf of people, and who need to add in and dial in numbers to a Teams meeting. So it's not required if you want people to have the dial pad and make calls and receive calls. This is just required for the, dial a number and a PIN in the Teams meeting, and also when you're in a meeting to invite a mobile or landline. Some organizations license everyone with it. Some just license the personal assistants or whoever it is that sets up the meetings. This one is £3 or $4 per user per month. So again, it's included in E5. So if you've got Office 365 or M365 E5, you already have this included. If you're an organization who is 300 users or below, there are some other options for packages around this. There's Microsoft Business Voice packages, which are slightly cheaper. They include some of this functionality that's slightly cheaper than buying them separately. And that's if you are an organization under 300 users. So Microsoft Business Voice, if you are a small organization, look into that because it's going to be a little bit cheaper than buying separately. You'll see I have the calling plan pricing. So with calling plans, you have options for domestic or international. And again, this is if you're not doing direct routing and you're not using your existing telco provider, it's you're buying the calling plans from Microsoft. They're available in your country. And so what we'll do is we'll buy a domestic calling plan for some users. Some users might need international and some users might need both. So you can have a mixture. The price doesn't really change if you have a mixture. So it's £9 or about $14.50 for each for domestic and international. And you can have a mixture of those. That's 1,200 minutes per user per month. So this is all per user per month. You'll see I've also included a smaller, and I didn't find the dollar amount, apologies, but you'll probably work it out. So £4.50, there is a 120-minute domestic calling plan. So if you have users where you know they're not going to be heavily making calls, this one might be a better option. And there is call or minute pooling available here. So if you have, and it's based on location. So say I have 5 users in France, and I've got 3 users with this plan, 2 users with this plan. The minutes will all pool to those users. So these users can actually use the leftover minutes from the other ones as long as they're in the same location. So there is minute pooling available, and in the admin center. In Microsoft Teams, you'll be able to see in the Teams reporting, there's PSTN minute usage and pooling reports. So you can see how many minutes you've got left and how many minutes are being used based on user and location. So that will help you with pooling those minutes, but that is available. But those are the prices as it stands for the Microsoft Teams calling plans. So if you're looking to move to Microsoft Teams calling, some of the functionality is absolutely great. Have a look at the features that are available. Make sure that nothing is missing with Teams calling. Make sure if you're looking at meeting rooms that your devices are compatible and you've looked into the license choice. Then when you're moving to Teams calling, we need to figure out, okay, do we want to do calling plans or direct routing? How are we going to migrate, and have we got the appropriate licenses? Now, just to note, the calling plans are not included in E5. So even if you have E5, you will still have to buy this separately. So just a caveat there. Microsoft were going to include this, but they haven't. So just be aware of that as well. So there are some licensing implications, but it's definitely the way of the future. VoIP solutions, that's how it's going to be. Very, very soon. It's there's no longer going to be a kind of landline on the desk. It's all moving towards these types of solutions for telephony. So if you're not doing it now, which is fair enough, eventually you'll find that this is how most organizations are moving to with their telephony solutions. And we've got a few minutes spare, so that was everything I wanted to cover with an overview. It definitely was an overview. We could spend days and days on Microsoft Teams calling. I'm gutted I only have an hour, but thank you so much. I've added my links in there again to please connect with me. I love to meet you people and get more connected globally as well, so please feel free to connect. But I'll pause now if there are any final questions. Thank you very much.
So there was a question in the chat from Stefano. Can you transfer a call to a Teams user that doesn't have a phone system in a domestic plan?
Oh, yes, I answered that as
okay. Sorry.
as we went through. No, that's no problem. Yes, you can transfer the call, but you need to have the license to be able to transfer. You need phone system to be able to actually transfer the call to get that feature. So you will need that, but no, you can transfer if they don't have a phone system. You don't need domestic calling plan, it's just phone system. Yes, and then yes, the business voice licenses. Yeah, if you're under 300 users, that's an absolute win. So definitely look into that. For those